action.
We rise today to talk about an issue that we started talking about over a year ago, and that is the oil export ban. And what we were going to do to, I think, hopefully educate not only the public about this 40-year-old ban, but also those colleagues of ours in our caucus who do not have the level of experience that we have with the oil industry. And I can tell you that it has been a journey. And we start in the first instance of really, and I want to make this point because I always make this point when I talk about it. Fundamentally, ignore all of the other policy arguments. There is absolutely no reason in the world to restrict the export of a commodity that we produce in this country. Commodities traditionally trade on a global market. They are, in fact, if we are not going to distort the market, they need to find their market. This is a 40-year-old ban that didn't make sense when they did it, and it made even less sense in an environment where states like North Dakota were on the path to produce over 2 million barrels of light sweet crude from our shale formations a day. And so when we look at the effort and we look at kind of the analysis, at the end of the day, occasionally good argument wins the day. And I think that's what you're seeing as we're on the verge, I think, of this Congress, signed by the President, lifting a 40-year-old ban on the exportation of crude oil that's produced in this country. I just want to make a couple quick points about it on a policy matter. First off, many people say, well, wouldn't that jeopardize our energy independence? Well, you know what? Closing off the market and making sure that our commodities couldn't find a market, that encourages investment other places than the United States of America. And so it's counterintuitive. You say, wouldn't this actually raise our gasoline prices? Well, we had study after study after study that concluded one simple thing. Either it would have no effect or it would have a downward effect, since gasoline prices were measured against Brent, which is the international pricing benchmark. And so when we look at what's good for consumers, what's good for jobs in states like New Mexico and North Dakota, what is good for national security, and what's good for our allies. I spent a lot of time over the last year talking to people from the EU, talking to people in Eastern Europe about the significance of energy security, and knowing that even though they didn't have a source of energy, that they could buy energy from a country like the United States of America. I frequently refer to our oil as democracy oil. It's not oil produced by countries that we are at odds with, that we disagree with. This is oil that is absolutely an opportunity to use that soft power, to use that ability to export. And that idea was shared not only by foreign policy experts who from conservative think tanks, but very many well-recognized Democratic foreign policy experts. And so we are at the point of actually getting this done, and that is the good news. But we also knew that frequently in the United States Congress, a good idea doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when we're willing to sit down and go to negotiations. And that's really where my great friend from New Mexico came in, taking a look at was there an opportunity to actually get a deal done, and what we could do to make this actually happen. And so we partnered up pretty early in making the pitch together. And so I want to ask my friend Senator Heinrich, would you please talk about the piece of this deal that supports the development of renewables, what that means for your state, which is also an oil-producing state, but what that also means for jobs, not only a state like mine, which produces, has a large manufacturing facility that manufactures blades, plus we think we're the Saudi Arabia of wind. I know there's probably 20 states that say that. In North Dakota, it's true, and I'm sure the presiding officer would agree that we are, in fact, the Saudi Arabia of wind. And so, Senator Heinrich, what does this mean in terms of renewables for you?
Well, thank you, Senator Heitkamp, for your leadership on this issue. I want to thank the presiding officer for his contributions to these conversations that allowed us to reach what has really been an incredible example of a bipartisan, balanced energy package, something we haven't seen for quite a while. And I just want to recognize the many, many, many hours that Senator Heitkamp spent in meetings of every complexion under the sun, from educating our colleagues who don't have oil and gas producing basins like we do, on the intricacies of what does this mean for price pressures, what does this mean for consumers, are the things that you intuitively might think actually not what you would see in the actual marketplace. Meeting after meeting with renewable energy associations in the solar field, in the wind field, and with colleagues on both sides of the aisle. People like the presiding officer, people like our Energy Committee chairperson, Senator Murkowski of Alaska. I want to thank you for all of that work, and it's really been a pleasure to work with you in this effort. This is a very, very big step for New Mexico, and obviously at any time when oil is trading under $50 a barrel in a state where we have two big basins, the Permian Basin in the southeast and the San Juan Basin in the northwest, not to mention production in the Raton Basin that's coming on. It's a very big hit, not only to our job situation and to the families that rely on those jobs, but also to our public schools in the state of New Mexico. And this opportunity to relax the oil export ban means something concrete for that industry and for those jobs in New Mexico. And it also means something very concrete for the future of jobs in New Mexico as well. The incremental work here on the renewables side is one of the single biggest pieces of policy on clean energy that I have seen in my adult lifetime. We are looking at two markets that have grown rapidly, that have produced, in solar's case, 200,000 jobs in the last few years, that would have taken an enormous hit if we would have allowed those incentives to go away. As a result of this package, we're going to see likely another 140,000 jobs in solar alone. Just the incremental impact on the carbon front, the extension will offset 100 million metric tons of carbon dioxide annually. That's like 26 coal-fired power plants. So these things impact small businesses across my state as well as across the country. But you look at a small state like New Mexico, 2 million people. We have close to 100 solar companies employing 1,600 people in these new fields, and it's growing rapidly. We've seen 358 megawatts of solar energy installed. We have 812 megawatts of wind energy currently installed, and another 300 in the pipeline right now, with another 500 to 1,000 jobs associated with that in 2014 alone. So this is the single biggest piece of predictability within renewable energy that we've seen in a very long time, and we've learned the reality that 1 + 1 + 1 does not equal 3. When you add a tax incentive 1 year and then you take it away and then you add it back, the sum of those is not as nearly as robust as when you have predictability over a period of time. That's what this does for our energy industries across the board, and I want to thank you for all of your work on it. I want to ask you a question in particular. This agreement obviously didn't happen overnight. I know we've been meeting for well over a year on this, and you've been thinking about it even longer than that. Can you talk a little bit about why, Senator Heitkamp, you're so passionate about this issue, and what specifically does it mean for the people of North Dakota?
Well, it wasn't that long ago that North Dakota became the second largest oil producing state in the country. We're challenged in North Dakota because we don't have the mature infrastructure of Texas and the basin. We are challenged with transportation, but the amazing thing is we produce the best crude in the world, light, sweet crude. And the problem with light sweet crude, over the years, it wasn't the dominant crude that was produced in the United States. And as a result, The refineries are basically geared up to refine heavy crudes. They're geared up to basically import crude from places like Venezuela, not Mexico, but Venezuela and some of the heavier crudes. And that's what the refiners can do. And a lot of the refineries that do can handle light sweet crude are not on a pipeline system. And so on top of producing this great quality crude, we have additional transportation costs, and we were seeing deducts. And you add to that the challenge of producing something that could be so important for energy security in our country, but also national security and helping our allies with their energy security in Europe. When you add the challenge of that product not being able to find a market, what that means is that this energy renaissance for the country that we are so proud that we've participated in, this energy renaissance begins to basically dim. This idea that we can be energy independent, starts dimming. And we start seeing people cut back on investment. We start seeing people reduce their plans to invest in this country when they know they can go offshore and actually market their product. And so the bottom line is that this isn't going to raise oil prices overnight. And those folks who may have a prediction that this is going to result in a dramatic increase, I think they don't really understand the oil markets and what's happening right now. But what it does do is it takes a commodity that should always have had the opportunity to find its market, and it applies free enterprise system principles, and it applies capitalistic principles. When you produce something in this country, you ought to be able to find your market. And it tells the American public, I think more, as people say, it's remarkable you've been able to get this far. It tells the American public that the United States Congress can function if people come willing to make a deal. And I see my friend from New Jersey, who a lot of people would not have suspected played such an important role in our discussions and such a willingness to learn. And it really impressed a lot of our friends in the oil industry with his rapid understanding of economics. I tried to tell him you were smart. They occasionally get fooled by press releases as opposed to actually meeting folks. And I think another great thing that has come as a result of this is certainly a willingness of the Democratic caucus to listen to this argument, has been a building of relationships that I hope will, in fact, allow us to have a reasoned debate about oil energy development in this country going into the future. And so, Senator Heinrich, I want to ask you to close out with just an explanation of how, when you look into the future, how critical this is to your school system and what you see in terms of the future of the industry as a result of this change in your state.
Well, thank you again, Senator Heitkamp. And I just want to say how important this is for the state of New Mexico, in part from the perspective that our economy has been incredibly challenged in the last few years. We have not seen the growth that many of our neighbors have seen coming out of the recession. One of the places where we have seen growth has been the solar industry. The people working in the solar industry today, those are new jobs. Having the certainty for our energy sector, which runs the gamut from the oil and gas basins that I talked about, to the incredible growth in solar energy, to the fact that we have a very, very strong wind component in the state. We have basically the eastern side of our state is very much in the same wind mapping zone as the panhandle of Texas. So this means predictability. It means jobs. It is one of the single biggest economic things that we could have done for the state of New Mexico since I've been here in the United States Senate. And so I think we have a lot to be proud of here. We were also able to extend the Land and Water Conservation Fund, something that has been working for this nation across the country for 50 years, that is very much tied to our leasing of oil and gas offshore. And certainly my colleague, Senator Udall, knows that program inside and out. He's been an incredible champion for it. His father made it happen when he was Secretary of Interior. So I would conclude my remarks and thank you again for allowing me to engage in this colloquy, and thank our colleagues for being able to work on a bipartisan basis.